Hi all, I have another fascinating and very instructive game to show you from Leela ID 532 against the Pedone chess engine, so from the Italian word for foot soldier. So that's why they've got a white pawn as a representative, as a kind of foot soldier, as their mascot. So this game by Edward Panic is Leela on a 1060 graphics card, and the Pedone chess engine is on a 4-core at 4 gigahertz. And let's have a look. The book sequence given goes like this. So that's the end of the book here. And Leela plays bishop g2, and we enter into the Benoni fianchetto variation basically here, where black is taking that. So we've got Benoni pawn structure. White castles rook e8, knight d2, which is fairly standard. So Leela's playing a very conventional maneuver here, knight c4. Black reacts with knight bd7. At the moment, there's the possibility of addressing knight c4, which looks at d6, with knight e5. So another positional move, a4. Leela's positional play seems to be like super grandmaster level, basically, in a lot of these games. Knight e5, we see h3. We see the move knight h5, and this reminds me a little bit of Cautionary against Kasparov. There was a classic game of Kasparov where he left the knight hanging on e5 for many moves. Will we see black trying to do the same thing? Immediately black is now threatening f5. If white doesn't play e4, I believe this is actually, say this move, there's a positional threat here after f5. If e4 now, then there's f4 justifying the knight on h5, and black's going to get an edge here, I believe, no matter what white does. With best play, white's going to be worse here because black's got that nice e5 square. Bishop's kind of hemmed in. It looks to be very nice for black there. So basically, this position, after knight h5, that is a trigger to try and do something to discourage f5. We have e4. Now black actually plays b6 here for the moment. And king h2 is played, so not tempted to try and kick the knight or anything just yet. Just king h2. We have f5 here, and now e takes f5. Now if g takes, then clearly that's bad because the knight is hanging. So bishop takes, though, is a kind of concession of the e4 square. What's happened now, it looks as though white's in a very comfortable position after this. Here, tactically, g4 fells, it seems, to bishop takes g4, check, and whatever white does, there's big trouble here. For example, here there's knight f4, and h3 is a big problem, might end up getting mated. Or alternatively here, on bishop, on king g1, believe it or not knight takes g4, but black has time, funny enough, this is a fascinating line in its own right. If knight takes g4, then knight f3, white's got a big advantage, kicking the queen and protecting against the mate threat. But actually black plays rook f8 here, and that changes the whole story quite significantly, because here f3 is kind of needed. If g takes, then knight g4 is vicious now, because black's ready with rook takes f3 on knight f3. That would just be horrible, checkmate. And if this is the case, then white would have, the only idea is queen takes, do a queen sack. Now this position ends up being better for black if black's energetic like this, to try and expose the white king and get some material back in style. So it's very dangerous basically to play the move g4 here. No matter how tempting, it's dangerous. That was avoided by Leela, which shows great tactical awareness in a way, playing these moves which look nice and positional and not being tempted by the more tactical g4. So the neural network of Leela understands maybe somehow the tactical dangers intuitively. We have knight f7 being played. On that addresses the g5 square here. On say a6, knight g5 is a pain because of knight e6. It would open up the bishop potentially. So for example here, this is just pretty nasty, opening up the bishop against a8. And here, in fact, queen d5 double attacking a8 and e6 is a total disaster for black. So, yep. On instead of a6 here, say h6. Then this position, actually f4 is nice. Here, g4 is actually nice. For example, here, queen takes g4 is possible. This is just a nice big advantage for white, whatever happens. Okay, so let's go back. So after knight d4, the knight went back to f7. Now we do have g4, and white actually gains an important light square bishop. Now at the moment, this bishop doesn't seem like the most dangerous light square bishop in the world. But watch what happens here. Knight f6, knight g3. So this provides the opportunity potentially for g5 without knight h5 now. The knight's holding the h5 square. The knight voluntarily moves away anyway in advance of anything like g5. And we have f4, making sure the knights are not using the e5 square or the bishop. So e5 has been properly sealed up here. c4, and now this is a really nice idea. It seems g5, this is all to please the bishop, I believe, this g5 move. Whilst restricting black's minor pieces, the bishop might occupy this diagonal h3 to c8. We have rook c8, h4, so beautiful stuff. There's also the possibility of weakening black's pawn chain around the king. Here, now, c3 was played. It's possible that in this position, actually, say rook e7, rook a3 might actually be a handy move, with the idea of just doubling with rook a f3. For example, like this position, not only getting bishop h3 in, but the rook's doubling for f5 potentially. White's going to have a small edge there. So it seems as though black maybe is concerned about stuff like that, but plays c3. We have b takes, rook takes, and now the rook gets out of the way of the firing line of the bishop. So it's good that the king's on h2 here because it's protecting the knight, so that's nice. Knight c5, we have h5 trying to undermine that pawn chain. Rook c4, and now the bishop does occupy that key diagonal. And not too concerned about tactical ideas, because there's always rook d2, I believe, to rook d4. So we see actually rook c3, a kind of almost like changing mind sort of move. And now rook e2, just challenging that rook on e8. Rook takes, queen takes. Knight b3. Now bishop b2. This is nice. After knight d4, queen goes to g2. There's a very, very nice idea here. It looks as though that knight's pretty strong in the centre. And normally, white wouldn't want to give up like the bishop here. But here, sometimes it's a prelude. When you give up a bishop of a certain colour, it's sometimes the other colour complex which is under attack shortly after. If look at an alternative here, rook c2, there's rook f2. For example, this position, there's a tactical knight f3 check to try and win the bishop. But this is fine for white here. White's going to have a big advantage there after bishop e6 in any case, even if it's opposite colour bishops. So, okay, we see rook c4. Now, guess what Leela plays? Okay, it's a logical positional move in a way. It gives up. Leela gives up the dark square bishop. And now kind of seizes that e-file. Doesn't play for bishop e6 immediately. In fact, the e6 square is now used by the queen. Yeah, that's the big idea here. Using the queen for e6. Putting pressure on g6 now laterally. We have g takes. And now bishop f5, threatening bishop takes h7 check. King f8. Just to give an example to put that on the board. Say rook b3 taking. This is just pretty nasty stuff. So yeah, bishop f5, king f8 is played. Now bishop takes, and there's a rolling g-pawn here. Queen e8, and now knight f5. And all of a sudden, this really does look quite crushing, this position. Black plays bishop h8. It looks, as I say, visually crushing as a common term now with Leela's games. But, you know, if queen takes here, then this pawn is really a menace. For example, like this. Wrestling knight takes d6 check. That's to protect d6, but then we can pin that, and it's just a total disaster scenario with the pawn queening. So this is really precarious for black. Black plays bishop h8, and now we have g6. Black's really in big trouble here. Black plays a check, king h3, check, and the game actually ended here. Black resigned with this move, with the check. Yeah, let's look at a continuation. There are various continuations. White's king could even go to h4 here, but the saner, so from a human perspective, might be king g2. So the king just goes there, and what does black do here now? Say taking on e6 takes, say rook e2, that just loses the piece. But if the knight moves back, then e7 is winning a piece anyway. g7 is really just cruel, super cruel, with the idea of bishop g6. And so if the king moves e8 queening, and if knight f7, rook e1 threatening, knight takes d6, or bishop takes f7, this is just absolutely end of game. The pawn's queening. So yeah, that's the game. I mean, it's so good for white. White can even venture out with the king if it wanted to. Maybe that was the idea of Leela's, to carry on with the king march like this. This is just totally hopeless. Here, by the way, this is a nice one. Rook h1, just keeping tons of pressure on black. This position would be totally hopeless. So anyway, yeah, I thought it was quite a nice positional game being highlighted here against the Benoni pawn structure. So the light square bishop, when it was kind of won, when black gave up the light square bishop found a nice diagonal. And Leela wasn't immediately keen just to occupy e6 with the bishop. By occupying with the queen, there was pressure laterally against g6. And when the bishop did come in, it came onto f5. Black was really under pressure on the light squares. It's like a positional masterclass. It really has the smoothness of a super GM positional play, like Michael Adams, who's currently playing in the British Chess Championship. It's really lovely to witness this positional play, I think, and I hope you feel the same way too. So Leela's going to be participating in TCEC 13. I'm going to be trying to follow those games as well. So I hope there's some interesting games to come out of that pretty soon as well. Hope you enjoy this. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks very much.